In 1961, a physician named Stuart Wolfe drove through the Lehigh Valley of eastern Pennsylvania to investigate an anomaly his colleague had been describing for years without anyone believing him. The town was called Roseto. 1,600 residents lived there, all Italian American, second and third generation. They worked in a slate quarry, they ate lard, they smoked. Their diets were high in animal fat, and their physical labor was the kind that wrecks the body rather than maintain it. Their rate of heart disease was half the national average. Wolfe checked the numbers. He checked them again. He brought in colleagues. Between 1955 and 1961, the age-adjusted death rate from myocardial infarction in Roseto was approximately 1 per 1,000 men. The national average rate was 3.5. Men over 65 in Roseto died of heart attacks at 1% annually. The national rate was 2. In 6 years, in a town of 1,600 people, not a single resident under the age of 47 died of a heart attack, regardless of their sex. He ruled out what he could: genetics, physical activity, occupation, access to healthcare. Nothing closed this gap. He turned his attention to what the numbers could not capture. Roseto had been settled in 1882 by immigrants from a single village in the Apennine Hills of southern Italy, Roseto Volfertore. They had reconstructed in the Pennsylvania state the social architecture of the place they came from. 3 generations lived under one roof, or within one street. The local church ran 6 separate civic societies. Neighborhood organizations operated by the dozens. Community life was not a weekend activity. It was the mechanism through which everything else worked. The job was found through it. The marriage was arranged through it. The dispute was settled in it. The dead were buried by it. You could not opt out of Roseto without leaving it physically, and almost nobody left. Wolfe published his findings in 1979. The variable that explained the anomalous hearts was not dietary, it was not genetic, it was not medical. It was the presence, unusually dense and unusually intact, of something the rest of the country had been quietly losing for 30 years. Belonging that could not be cancelled. In 1897, a French sociologist named Émile Durkheim published a book that should have changed everything. It did not. It changed sociology, but it did not change the thing it was about. Durkheim was 39. He had been born in Épinal, in the Vosges, the son and grandson of rabbis stretching back to 8 generations. He was supposed to become a rabbi himself. He chose instead to study why people die before they should. The book was called Suicide. Durkheim was not interested in the psychology of individual despair. He was interested in the rate. The rate is what changes. What he found working through mortality tables across Europe was that the rate followed a pattern so consistent it almost looked engineered. It was not the highest among the poorest. It was not highest among the most visibly suffering. It was highest among the people who had been released from obligation. Unmarried men died at higher rates than married men. Protestants higher than Catholics. People in periods of rapid economic growth higher than people in stable economies. The recently retired, the recently bereaved, the recently relocated. The common variable was not suffering. It was disconnection from a structure that required something of them. He coined a word for this condition: anomie, the absence of the experience that what you do matters to anyone in particular. 64 years before Wolfe drove into Roseto, Durkheim had already written the mortality tables of its opposite. Wolfe watched Roseto for another 2 decades. In the 1970s and early 1980s, the generation that had kept the structure began to die. Their children moved into single-family houses on the outskirts of town. The 3-generation households thinned. The civic societies shrank. The slate quarry closed. By the early 1980s, the Roseto rate of heart disease had corrected upward to meet the national average. The correction was the cost. Nothing else in the town had changed. The lard was still in the pan. The cigarettes still burned. The diet and the genetics and the air and the water were all the same. What was gone was the belonging. Durkheim died in Paris on the 15th of November, 1917. He was 59. His son André had been killed 2 years earlier in a Bulgarian field hospital at the age of 25. Durkheim never recovered. Colleagues noted that within months of the news, he seemed to have aged by decades. He stopped publishing, he stopped teaching. The man who had identified more precisely than anyone before him the conditions under which human beings lose the will to continue, did so under the most ancient and uncomplicated version of those conditions. The person whose well-being depended on him was gone. There was no longer anyone who needed what only he could provide. He had understood the theory completely, but the theory did not protect him from the data.